Woody, to those who got. I can't sing it by myself hardly. Sweet morning, and we'll all shout together in that morning.
The old man was one of the first Oklahomans, but we have never seen the looking glass of his mind. His history has always been there, looked through the looking glass darkly.
I thought Oklahoma was the beautifulest place I ever saw in the spring.
Oh, look at yonder girl, that's some Indians. And all the cowboys were colored.
Bass Reeves. I can tell you more about him than perhaps you ever heard.
He wasn't too good with a rope.
I'm one of the men that made General Lee surrender.
They did everything to make you feel that you were something else than a human.
We had to live, though. That's right. We had to put up with it.
When Andrew Jackson had all the Indians on that trail of tears, whether the history books show it or not, a great percentage of those people were black people.
I can remember when before they ever drove the Indians out on across the Mississippi River. That was them Indians had an awful time. I remember my mother and them talking about it. I was about 7 or 8 years old. They beat them, they shot them, they killed them, they just murdered them all kinds of ways. And run them on back across the Mississippi River, back over in Oklahoma. And this wasn't fitting for nothing. They just decided just to let them have. They give them this. Never bother them about it anymore. The treaty was, as long as water run down the stream, that they would never be bothered about this country. Hide the night, oh Lord, hide the night.
No one knows for sure how many blacks came on the Trail of Tears. Census takers in those days didn't bother to knock on doors, and runaway slaves weren't answering any roll calls.
A whole lot of the colored, you see, you ran off, and the Indians smuggled them in there. They would help them out. So all of them down that Mississippi River was just a dark swamp, and they could never get them out of there. They stayed in there. They would go back, slip at night, and go back on little masters near them farm and kill hogs and cut it all up and go all the way back to start a song. Said, way back, I'm going to make it to my shanty, way back. The dogs on my truck and the chickens on my back, but I'm going to make it to my shanty way back. They would get turpentine and put it all under the bottom of the feet to keep the dogs from tracking them. The cattle rollers would come out with the hounds and go out and run them in the woods and run them and probably catch a whole lot of them. Every time they caught a slave, they got $700 for that slave. That's the way they personally made their living.
Oh, I'd rather be fishing for Brimmy and the creek and working in the sun out here all week. For specs to get here, Lord, specs to get here, I got to keep on.
Not all of the slaves were runaways. Some of the tribes in the South had plantations of their own. A black back was the going thing in a cotton field, no matter what color the owner happened to be. But ironically, it was this association that set the lifestyle in Indian Territory for more than 100 years.
I got to do it now. I got to do it now. I got to do what I'm doing.
All of them people from northern Georgia, Tennessee, and all that, when they were moved out, they carried their slaves with them. And their slaves were the ones that taught them agriculture, house building, and how to make a living other than fishing or hunting, because that was the Indians' tradition, just fishing and hunting. But now that was the salvation of Oklahoma, and that's the reason why it got to be known as 5 civilized tribes. These people live like civilized people.
married into the Indian family. That's why there's so many black Indian, Creek and Seminole Indians.
And many of the Indians that ranked way high were black people. Most people don't know that Osceola, the chief of the Seminoles down there, was a half Negro. His mother was a Negro woman, but his father was a chief. Look at Jim Simmons over there if you want to. He's about 2/3 Indian, but on the rolls he's a freedman. All right. Look at Reverend Davis here. He's about a quarter breed, but on the rolls he's a black man. Look at me. I'm a quarter breed Cherokee, but the rolls say I'm a Negro.
If you commit murder, you're just subject to be tried for murder and victim for murder and be shot at sunrise. That's what my old stepdaddy would say. You've had your trial. I've heard him say that. You've had the jurors, you've had an attorney, you've had your witnesses. The jurors have found you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I set your execution at sunrise next Thursday morning. That settles it. The laws were written by the Indian and Negro legislation. You see, to commit was something awful. And whoever did it, he wouldn't like it because it'd be remembered well. He would announce it all around. He's going to whip a certain man on a certain day. And it would come from far and near. There wasn't no certain whip to be beaten with. The officer would go to the nearest wood, cut down a limb, trim it up nicely, bring in 2 or 3 of them. There was a whipping that day. And if he was caught again, there was 100 lashes on the same back by 2 officers. That's right. One 50 lash and the other 50 lash. One man that counting that they wouldn't be missed or given. Now, the third offense, if you caught again, that's right. And the third offense was death. No bond, no reprieve, no renewal, vacation, nothing of the kind. They had no chamber of death. They didn't hang by rope. They had a block they set up. They would set the prisoner on there, tie a white cloth across his chest about where his heart was. 2 officers would take a rifle and step off according to the presiding officer. 30 feet, 30 yards or something like that. And then turn at his command. I've seen that right at the old Lee Courthouse.
For 61 years, Oklahoma was primarily a land of the red and the black. A checkerboard, torn apart only by the endless autumn of the Civil War and its grim harvest. The Choctaws and the Chickasaws went with the South. The other tribes split. Black men fled north when they could.
The Battle of Honey Springs was the first real test they had as to whether Negro soldiers would fight or not. Practically all of the soldiers who fought at Honey Springs, they trained them up in Kansas. Then moved them from Kansas down to Fort Gibson. And the principal group were mostly all black soldiers. All of these rangers from Texas and all, they knew that the Negro soldiers were at Fort Gibson. And they thought they knew they wouldn't fight. But they marched all night long, and that's what they caught them by surprise. They didn't think that the soldiers would march all night long. They were expecting them, but not that early. They left from Fort Gibson They crossed the river over there on barges and marched down, right on down through part of Muskogee, right down by Chimney Mountain. And the Confederate soldiers that came on up brought wagon loads of handcuffs. And the purpose was they going to take them, they don't handcuff all of these Negro soldiers because they knew they wasn't going to fight anyhow, and they could just round them up like a bunch of cattle and handcuff them and take them back. They were going to march them back in handcuffs. And they were running that, let's go get them and capture them, figure they were going to capture all of them. And that is when the colonel said, now, and stood up. They tell me he got shot, but not killed. He got it now. And all of those Negro soldiers raised up, and all those soldiers were exposed. Prior to that, bushwhacking and hiding. They come running on a charge and just slaughtered them down. And then he said, charge. And said those Negro soldiers went wild. Not only would fight, but they fought effectively, and I guess some of them said they fought outrageously. but that established that the Negro soldier would fight, and from that time on, the War Department began enlisting them as regular men. Prior to that, they enlisted them only as servants, but they started enlisting them then as fighting men.
As always in the aftermath of war, thousands were set adrift by peace. This time, many were black. For most, the only home had been Army issue. Now that it was gone, there was no other, so they headed west. A savage tide was brewing in Oklahoma, and it would fall to the black man to cool the kettle. During the war, troops had been removed from the western edge of Indian Territory, and now Plains Indians were raiding the herds of the Chickasaws and the Choctaws. Bootleggers and horse thieves were entering illegally and approaching white settlement, Oklahoma, into a warpath. Some of the black men were asked to keep their uniforms. Congress was forming 6 black regiments. 2 were to be stationed in Oklahoma. General George Armstrong Custer was asked to command one of those regiments, but he refused, and in so doing set his path to the Little Bighorn 10 years later. Officially, those who came to Oklahoma were known as the 9th and 10th Cavalry, but to those who knew them best, the Cheyenne, Comanche, and Kiowa, they will always be remembered as the Buffalo Soldier. To the Indians, the black man's nappy hair resembled buffalo hide, and the name, a mixture of fear and respect, stuck. For 20 tempestuous years, the Buffalo Soldiers protected Indians from Indians and whites from renegades, and themselves from both. They were the law in western Oklahoma. Much of that time, they had the unpopular task of keeping boomers out of Indian Territory. One man, William Couch, was escorted back to Kansas 3 times during the winter of '83. In the spring of '84, he was trying again. A long line of wagons moved south along the Canadian, more than 1,000 settlers. This time, they meant to stay. Not far from the present-day Oklahoma City, they made camp and waited. Captain Carroll arrived with 90 tough-as-nails veterans of F and I troops and immediately got down to business. Couch was bound and tossed into a wagon. His followers could either move out under their own power, or they could be helped out. Suddenly, the command came down to fire, but the rhythmic cadence spun slowly. Some say more slowly than usual, as the sergeant watched the captain, and the captain watched the crowd. Only a heart's thunder sounded in the land. No one fired out of turn. The hasty order was countermanded seconds later. The settlers left. And Couch would finally get a street named after him in a city of his dreams. Even with all this, the Buffalo Soldiers made for themselves a reputation second to none. They fought in every major Indian war in the Southwest. They quieted the Oklahoma frontier. And in the process, won 12 Congressional Medals of Honor. Their lasting memorial is Fort Sill, which they built and still stands. With most of the white men off fighting a civil war, what little cattle raising that was done was handled by women, children, and slaves. Given responsibilities that were denied in normal times, the black men soon numbered among the most skillful cowhands on the Chisholm Trail.
Speaking about Mr. Pickett, Bill Pickett, I knew him, not intimately, but I knew him real well. However, he was grown. I was a child. It just so happened that as kids will do, I kind of called myself a little sweet on his granddaughter. And this enabled me to go up and be around him quite a while. Mr. Pickett had some livestock on a little acreage he was working, and occasionally they'd get out, and that would kind of irritate him. And he'd have to hunt for them at night, and the neighbors would squawk. So one day, one of his cows got out, and his wife called him and told him that the cow was gone. He had to go hunt for him. Knowing Mr. Pickett, he wasn't too good with a rope. Now, he could ride real well, better than average. But his roping left something to be desired. So he chased this cow, and he couldn't get the rope on him, so seemingly through a little fit of anger, he's just going to manhandle this cow, and he rode along beside him, and he got off on him. He leaned over between his horns and bit this cow in the nose. This threw the cow off balance, and he stumbled. Cow stumbled, he's trying to hold on. He just held on with his teeth and fell on over his head. And when he hit the ground, this sudden jerk threw the cow. And to his amazement, he wanted to know if it was just a freak thing or whether it was something out of the ordinary, and he tried it again, and it worked again. So according to him and his daughter, Miss Nanny, that's how bulldogging was really originated.
Few of the white men and none of the blacks who rode the cattle trails kept accurate journals. In school, they wrote history with their horses and punctuated it with 6 guns. And yet, to passing references of Black Sam or simply a colored man named Charlie, it is clear that no fewer than 3,000 black cowboys passed through Oklahoma on the cattle drives to Kansas. Some of the first ranches in Oklahoma had all black cowboys.
Jake Simmons was a man believing in producing and making things come to pass. He was that kind of man.
And he was an unusual farmer. He was a great farmer and a rancher, was one of the leading ones around there. And about the first man that I know of the black people that accumulated. Most of the others had a lot of land at the time, but was allotted to them.
He is the first in that part of the country to buy those registered Hereford cattle. He was a go-getter.
How much did he accumulate? What size?
Well, about 1,000 acres.
1,000 acres, and it's still in the family, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still in the family.
That's right. Then he was helpful to other people. He raised many children aside from his own. There was always somebody in Jake Simmons' home, young man or young woman without a home. He lived that way until he died.
Bud and Ed Cox were well-known Creek citizens, freedmen, and they operated a big ranch out there 5 miles west of Wetumka. And every summer they would have a branding festival. They'd get out and round up their cattle, and those black cowboys would go out and bring those cattle in. They had maybe 1,015 head of them at a time. Indians and colored freedmen owned all the land, and the whites didn't have a chance to get in here. All the ranching business was done by colored, and all the cowboys were colored. There weren't any whites until after statehood, when the country was opened up.
Bass Reeves, I can tell you more about him than perhaps you ever heard.
The officers of the law, the chief one among us in the Indian Territory, were known as United States Marshals. They came in from the states. They were paid by the United States government. And Bass Reeves came from Arkansas as one of those United States Marshals. Bass was a kind, sympathetic man, but he was a brave man, and then mentally and physically strong. He could whip most any 2 men with his fist. He was a man that when he went after a group now, brother, he'd bring you in, that's all. But he was very kind and sympathetic. He never bulged in and caused trouble. I've seen him come in the community and come to the church on Sunday, and he'd have a warrant for somebody to call him out and said, I've got a warrant for you, sir, but would you mind coming into Muskogee at the marshal office tomorrow morning? He'd tell you that nicely. He said, hey, I don't know what it is. You better go see about it. If I have to arrest you, you see, they'll take you to Fort Smith. And you'll be away from your family and everything. And he got lots of it worked done just that way. His son grew up here. He married one of the native women here. And somehow or another they got into trouble and he killed her, he murdered her. Leo Bennett was the head marshal here. And he was arming his men. He got word that the boy had determined not to be arrested alive. Threatened them not to come to his house because he wasn't going to be arrested. Bass got a hold of it. Bass went to the office, Leo Bennett's office, and asked them not to go up there. Some of you will get killed.
Let me have the warrant, and I'll go up there. It's a bench warrant. And I'll do just what the warrant says. I'm going to bring him in, dead or alive. That's right. Well, the people who knew that, they colored people, they tell me a number of them followed him to the house where this young man was, begging him and insisting on that he not do it for fear he might get killed. But he went on, Bass did, got to the house, and he yelled to this boy, his name was Benny. And now Benny said, "You're no more my son." That's right. You committed a crime, and I have a warrant in my pocket for you, a bench warrant. It's either to bring you in dead or alive, and I'm going to take you in today, one way or the other. No, just that's all there is to it. You can come on out with your hands up, or else your whole body will be down. That's right. Benny came out. The people standing around hollered to him, said, "Don't raise your hands till you show." Bass will certainly get you. And he meant to do it. And he arrested Benny and took him in. Benny went to penitentiary. traveled by the only mail route between Muskogee and Okmulgee. That was a through road going west. People came that way going to Homestead. And I was quite a small boy there, but I remember well, they passing there and they would stop at our place to get water. Some of them camp overnight. There's a grove of trees there and they camped there and got wood to burn, and some of them would stay there 2-3 days resting or recruiting. And I'd hear my mother talking with the women folk, and they said they were on their way to the promised land. I didn't know what that meant. They were going to Homestead, the original Oklahoma.
Oklahoma Territory. In 1892, when I first came here, why, there's 2 frame buildings here and the rest was tents and dugouts.
Now those that had horses and cattle and stuff like that, why, they made it. But then now you take a person to come in here with nothing, just his bare hands, well then he had to dig this out.
Happy? Yes, sir. I was the happiest fellow you ever saw. I thought Oklahoma was the beautifulest place I ever saw in the spring. All kind of flowers come up. It was like that, you know. Yeah, I like Oklahoma, yes.